Okay, so wanted to talk a little bit about astrophotography and what I do, and then show you a few images tonight that have been taken over the last year or so. So the equipment I've got, the mount is a little bit older CGM DX mount, bit on the heavy side, but it works pretty well with the two scopes I've got. My first scope I picked up about 6-7 years ago is an iStar refractor. It's a 6-inch f8, so a 1200 millimeter focal length. And it's only a doublet, so it's got some issues when you start trying to do imaging with it. It works fine if you don't have things that are really bright in the image, but if you have very bright objects, you start seeing some chroma aberration in it because it's not fully light corrected for all colors. And I do love the scope, though. It's great for viewing through an eyepiece, and with the right care, it works pretty well with imaging. The newer one I got was not quite a year ago now, was the Skywatcher Quattro 8-inch f4 Newtonian reflector. And it's an 800 millimeter focal length, and it's actually made for imaging. So it's set up for attaching a camera to it, where a normal Newtonian has some issues because of the way the links and the focuser is set up on it. That have two guide scope setups that I use. One is a 50 millimeter 4.2 little scope, and I attached a ZWO ASI 120 mm camera to this. This is the flat, kind of large round ones that are uncooled, and it works very well, but I wanted something that was a little bit easier to deal with. So I picked up an off-axis guider, and then ended up adding ZWO ASI 174 mm Mini. And the Mini was required to focus that guide camera with the particular off-axis guider I got. It isn't with all the off-axis guiders, but the one I picked up, I needed the Mini for it. Some of the images you'll see were taken with a Nikon D800E digital single lens reflex. It's unmodified, so it's just straight stock. And then the main camera I've been using for quite some time now is ZWO ASI 2600 mm Pro. What that mm means is a monochrome camera, and the Pro means that it actually cools. So I can cool that camera down to 35 degrees Celsius below the ambient temperature, and that significantly reduces the amount of noise that I get. We also have a 7-position filter wheel, which makes life
says options
so much easier.
at the top.
And then I've got
Larry, I'm afraid I muted you.
okay, I think I unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I was trying to mute somebody else.
That's okay. Thanks for doing that. Probably it was about where I mentioned the filter wheel. The next thing was the filters I use with the monochrome camera. There's a set of 4 luminance, red, green, blue that are called the wideband filters, and then a hydrogen alpha, oxygen 3, and sulfur 2 filters that are the narrowband filters. And I'll talk about those in a little bit more detail later. I do use the Nina imaging software. I've tried Astrophotography tool, APT, and a few others, and I really like Nina a lot, and I've pretty much stayed with that and find it very helpful. And I've got a mini PC that have on the mount, and that drives Nina and the whole setup. And then I remotely connect to that mini PC to control everything from either a laptop, my phone, or an iPad, something like that. Oops, something's not. Okay, there we go. So for processing software, I use Deep Sky Stacker DSS for stacking the images, and it's a free software package, and I find it really works well for me. I've tried a few others, and I keep going back to DSS. It just plain works, and I played with it enough so that I understand some of the limitations, and it seems to do a good job for me, at least. And then Photoshop is the other tool that I use for the stretching and processing the images. And if you're not familiar with the term stretching, what you're really doing with this is when you stack the images in DSS, the image you're looking at has almost completely black. You might see a few stars normally in it, but normally you don't see anything. And what you've got to do is all the data is on the far left side of the histogram in the image. And what you've got to do is pull that data from the left and bring it closer to the center, pushing it more towards the right so you can start seeing the details in the image. For Photoshop, I've got several add-ons that I played games with and found to be very helpful. There's Deep Sky Colors has a free filter called Hasta La Vista Green, HLVG. It's absolutely wonderful for getting rid of green that shows up in images quite often. And another tool that I've been using for some time now is from Pro Digital software called Astroflat Pro. It's another filter. And what it does is it gets rid of gradients that is very common to see within the images. And it does a very good job of that. I tried a couple others, and this is the one I ended up purchasing and using. It's not too expensive. Then I've also got Topaz Denoise AI and Sharpen AI. They come in handy for cleaning up the noise and sharpening some of the deep sky objects. And then I've also got Astronomy Tools action set. There's several action sets out there that deal with astronomy. I've tried this one, it works well for me, and I've been pretty happy with it. So when I said I've got the LRGB filters, what I want you to see here is in this graph, it's a bandpass that you see what the frequency of the light that the blue filter will pass, the green and the red. And then in kind of a light gray that kind of almost lays on top of those three filters, but it actually starts just inside of the blue, is the luminance filter. And so it's not letting everything through, which is what that heavy dark line that's outside the colored graphs, that's the clear filter that just doesn't do anything as far as filtering. It just is a protection for dust primarily. But what
it's every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So it does vary. You're right. Absolutely.
I'm sorry,
You
question?
don't have to have it outside. I just mentioned that. So you get one inside, we'll go inside.
You pick it. You pick. Whatever you guys want to do, we'll do.
Well, we can do it.
Bob, can you
All right,
mute?
inside it is.
But if it should change,
I have,
Whoops. Thanks. I think that did it, Bob. Can you still hear me?
yes. Oh,
Okay.
I'm muted. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thanks.
That's the second time I've had to mute Merritt, so.
Okay. Note that in between the green and the red, there's this notch that occurs for the mercury and sodium lights. And so these filters do cut through light pollution pretty well because of that. So when you look at the narrowband filters, this kind of in the blue-green area, that's the oxygen 3. And then over in the red area, you've got the hydrogen alpha and the sulfur 2. And these things are really, really narrow. It's 6.5 nanometers bandpass on these. You can get them that are tighter. You can also get them that are made for different focal length telescopes, because when you get into the narrowband filters, if you've got a very fast telescope like a hyperstar, you're going to need different filters for narrowband than you would for the normal telescope. The particular filters I've got, they're good for about 3.5 up to, or f3.5 up to about f10. The one thing about the filters is you can actually cut through light pollution really well and even image when the moon is out, as long as you don't get too close to the moon. And that's kind of subjective. If it's not working, then you know you're too close, because there's really nothing that tells you what the distance is going to be. It just depends how bright it is and everything. And then the one exception is the oxygen 3. It is much more susceptible to having the moon light collected in it. And I've actually got a few images where the hydrogen alpha and the sulfur 2 were wonderful, and the oxygen 3 was kaput. There's nothing there just because of the moon. And expect your exposure times to be much longer because of these filters, because you're not letting very much light in. So following are going to be a few images taken over the last year. And I want you to think about astrophotography, something that is difficult. There's no way around it. It's not simple getting everything so that the tracking is there to get these real fine points of stars and everything in line up so that you can stack hours worth of imaging data and still end up something that's sharp and crisp and work. But it is very enjoyable. It's going to take time to improve, so don't expect to just go out and jump into this and be able to start producing great images right off the bat. Equipment helps a lot. You need to get the right stuff, but you need to develop a skill set also. And it's part of it is doing the imaging out in the field or in your backyard or wherever. But part of it is also going to be how you process the images, because it's not necessarily simple in how you go through some of these. And I look at it more as a journey instead of a destination. And it's fun. It's one of the fun things that I do, and I really enjoy it a lot. But hopefully, if you've ever tried it, that you've had good experiences. And one thing I would recommend is if you get a mentor or talk with other people within the club that have done imaging, they can really help speed up the learning curve on this. So this first image was taken with my Nikon and the 6-inch refractor, just a partial moon. And I love the moon as imaging. It's actually great for lunar eclipses. We've got one coming up in a little over 2 months, I believe, that's going to be full. And but the moon's fun, especially like it a lot when thin crescents. And part of the reason is you see along the terminator here in the lower half, you can see the shadows that are over those craters. And if you try to do a full moon, everything is very flat. You have a hard time seeing detail on it. So anything getting away from the full part of the moon cycle, the better off you're going to be for imaging it. This is the Bubble Nebula, and it's this image is called an HOO, and what that means, it was taken with narrowband filters only, And the H alpha data was assigned to the red channel, and the oxygen 3 data was assigned to both the green and the blue. And then what you end up with is this type of an image. They tend to be mostly red because hydrogen alpha tends to be a much stronger signal than the other filters. But it's not always true. I've got one filter or one image coming up at the end where it'll show that that's different. So this is the Orion Nebula, and this is a LRGB, and so I used the red, the green, and the blue data assigned to their respective channels in Photoshop, and then the L data gets assigned to a luminance layer. And what that does is it tends to bring out detail that you won't necessarily see with the 3 color layers. The 3 color layers add a lot of detail, but by bringing the luminance in, it helps pull out some of that finer stuff. This is another image of Orion Nebula that was taken shortly after the other one. And this is an HOO again, so hydrogen and then oxygen 3, oxygen 3. And you can see it's quite a bit different. Let me toggle back to the previous one. There, whoops. So that's straight color. And you see a lot more stuff going on inside of the nebula. That's why Hubble and a lot of the space stuff tend to use mostly narrowband images, although they do use the red, green, blues. You can see where the hydrogen data is because of the red, and then there isn't much blue going on with this thing, but it gives you an idea what's going on with that particular set of narrowband filters and the ionized gases there. This is the luminance data by itself, just imaged as a black and white. So it shows you what data you're seeing without adding any color to it. And then this is the Rosette Nebula, another HOO image. And then this is the Lobster Claw Nebula, and this is a different one. It's an SHO. And so sulfur 2 is assigned to the red channel, hydrogen alpha assigned to the green, and oxygen 3 assigned to the blue. And when you first assign these, you end up with this funny looking green image that makes no sense. And then in Photoshop, what you've got to do is tweak where those colors actually fall. You're kind of pushing the colors outside of the normal defaults. And by doing that, you end up with this blue and gold palette that is come to be known as the Hubble palette, because a lot of Hubble images are taken with this palette. And then this is the Teddy Bear Nebula. It's actually, I've got this labeled wrong. This is actually an HOO image. It says SHO, but it should be HOO. And it takes a while to figure out where it is, but kind of just right of center is an eye, then you've got a nose down and the left, and then you got a mouth near the bottom. But once you see the teddy bear in it, every time I look at this, I can't see anything but the teddy bear anymore. And then this is another HOO image, but you'll see all the blue in it because they have a lot of, in Thor's helmet, there's a lot of oxygen 3 data. And this actually has a hydrogen alpha luminance layer added to it to help bring out a little bit more of the detail in the image, because I really needed more data on this particular one. So that's all I wanted to show you tonight. Does anyone have any questions?
Bob, you want to unmute people so that if anyone has a question, they can ask?
Uh, I can go through and,
Oh, I see. You need to do it one at a time. Huh?
right.
All right. If anyone's a question, mute yourself and then
I
ask.
think that's what I would think, is anybody can unmute themselves, I think.
Yeah, I did mine. I just unmuted myself. So I just want to compliment you, Larry. Your camera is exceptional and your images are so sharp. I really like them. And the way you've showed how to combine the various palettes, or how the image shows up in various palettes using the Orion as an example is very good as well. So my compliments to you, Larry. It was very good.
Thank you, Amin. It's fun. I knew early on I didn't want to start with a one-shot color after I saw what I was getting from my Nikon. And I wanted to go into the monochrome so I could get into the narrowband filters primarily. And it's fun and enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, very good.
So I guess no questions. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing.
Okay, so it's my turn next, I suppose.